you know, it was still, you know, very, made Ellen swim out to the dock.
Ellen by herself? Is this for a
Yes.
test? This was for a test? To
I
get,
can't
like to,
remember
well,
what,
it must have been for,
I was, you know, that lake was deep,
well, Howe Lake.
yes.
Yeah.
And going out to that dock was deep, and I did not like that.
Yeah. But it must have been for a test, because George and I had to do it too.
Yeah, so, I mean, it was fairly simple there in Hull, Michigan. I mean,
It was a tiny town.
it was a tiny town, but remember when we went back? You and I, how between Howe and Brighton,
Yeah,
it
Brighton
had
had
all
changed.
become commercial.
Yeah, but Howe still had kept
But
a lot
that
of its.
stretch of land between
Oh,
Brighton
yes,
and
yes,
Howe
yes, yes,
had
yes.
all been built up.
Yes, oh, yes. Yeah, it was all
Yeah.
farmland when we were there.
And
Empty.
right there along, we lived there when we came to Howe, Michigan. We couldn't find a place to live. We'd go out every night looking for a place to live. We'd go into Ann Arbor and this and that.
Is this
and-
before we found Stutzer Road?
Huh?
Is this when we were looking and found
No,
Stutzer
when we
Road?
first went there.
Oh, okay.
And we found the cabins at the lake
Oh,
where the Ukrainians
Yeah.
had
yeah.
their land. And
Yeah.
what was his name, Nick or someone, the guy, the caretaker, Stanley, he let us stay
Over the
past
winter.
the season.
I remember.
Well, not winter, but it
I
got in.
remember that, but I can't call to mind his name at the moment.
I can't even call his name, but he let us stay there.
Yeah,
And he lived in a house across the highway.
okay,
And we stayed there and paid rent.
right.
And we had that little cabin,
Mm-hmm,
part of a cabin,
yeah.
until we found the house on Glenwood Drive. Oh,
Okay.
wait, is that the
That's
first?
right. Yeah, that was the first one.
Yeah, that was the
Yeah.
first house we found. And do you remember the time Aunt Helen and you guys were out playing and that hillside? Oh, that was terrible. We had, the house was level and then it was a steep drop, not a steep drop, you know, it was like
Like a
one level
slope.
drop, and
Yeah.
it was like a two-story house
Right.
with a basement. And Stephanie and Eileen, cousin Eileen, and all the house were, of course, visiting us.
Mm-hmm.
And right on that hillside, as you went to the bottom part where the patio was a hornet's nest. And they, remember that?
We rolled
And
down the
they-
hill.
They rolled down the hill or played there or
No, no,
something.
no, we
because
rolled
they
down.
disturbed them. They came running in, and I'll tell you, all those hornets came after them.
Oh, gosh.
They came into
Sounds
the house, and I think Eileen was bitten.
All three of us were.
And
It was George, Eileen, and I.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, these things are nasty.
Oh.
They attack you. And they came right after
It's
them.
bad. They're really very
They killed
bad.
them in the house, too.
Yeah, yeah.
And then, do you remember on Elgin Drive, you know, we had, I painted that bathroom a lime green. Do you remember the downstairs bathroom?
Yes.
It was a lime green.
Yes, on Elgin Drive, yes,
Uh-huh.
yes.
And
How did you happen to paint it lime green?
It was a lime green.
I remember, it was very, very vivid
Yeah,
and
well, you know
a
what?
deep,
These were the
it was an
colors.
accent color,
I know.
yeah.
And, you know, we was, sometimes, you know, you sit on the toilet, and there's a wall there, and I'd say to Dad, I hear something, there's noise behind that wall.
Ugh.
I said, I hear vibration,
Oh.
Great.
vibration. I kept telling, and of course Dad's ignoring it, you know. You have bees in your head or something like that. He's ignoring it, and I kept telling him, I hear noises in there. There is movement behind that wall. Oh, glory, did we have it. And then how we found out they came into the basement, didn't they?
Well, they would have had to, I mean,
I don't think that originally that, I don't remember if somebody was stoned or
No, I think what happened was,
They may have come in into the lavatory.
no, I think you were down at the desk and they came in to the basement and you realized we had a problem. And so Dad got into at dusk, he got into trench coat and, you know, covered his head and everything. And what did you do? You went up on a ladder and got them, how did you get them? Through
In
the,
twilight,
oh, through the attic? And you put something down the side of the, behind the wall?
no, I
Oh,
squirted
and
this
then-
in, the whole, outside at the junction of the garage wall and,
Oh, okay.
the
And
lavatory.
then you smoked them with some kind of a,
Insecticide, I squirted that,
yes, that's what happened then. They all dropped into the basement.
that's right, they were dying and they fell into the basement because they couldn't,
Ugh.
stand up or anything like that.
Oh, we had a lot back
Wow.
there. I mean, that was, and you know what? The same thing happened to Sheldon, 2 doors up.
Yeah.
The boy kept saying, you know, that he heard something up in the ceiling, and they ate through the ceiling.
Well,
Who was that?
Sheldon's,
Sheldon,
next to Webster's.
You know, they kept telling the mother, we hear noises up there, we hear noises. And here they, a big hive of bees up in the ceiling, and they actually came through the ceiling.
Wow.
Found their way through, so.
Yeah.
So that's about it.
Okay.
I can't think of anything exciting. There wasn't anything. And then we made the long trip from, Dad was, I can't remember how we came. Did you drive the car from Howell, Michigan when we moved?
Do I
Yeah.
what?
Drive the car from Howell, Michigan when we moved.
Yeah, we all were in that car, Mom.
What?
We all were in the car.
We must have been.
Oh, I distinctly remember. We arrived in the evening.
Yes, that's
I
right.
distinctly remember
And we
that.
had donuts and cider.
Yes. And the house was cold. I remember that.
Yeah.
I remember, and that was our first night in the house. The new
No
house.
furniture. I don't know if we slept on the floor.
We did. Yeah, where else? Where did we slept?
It was a nice house.
It was a nice, Elgin Drive? It was
Yeah,
an awesome house.
yeah, it was pretty nice. But
Yeah, it was a nice.
I remember Mrs. Herchick saying that she and Mrs. Albeck, they were so alarmed that somebody was coming to move there with 5 children. And they, you know, they thought the end of the earth was.
There goes the neighborhood.
Happening. That, and then they realized that, you know, you guys would not be, you know, a problem.
Right.
And she would tell me afterward about how they were afraid of 5 children, and that that you guys were the best children.
Aw.
No, she always told me that.
Who, Mrs. Herchick?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Mrs. Herchick.
Yeah, yeah.
And I remember after, you know, this Mrs. Albeck's, it was her niece's husband. We had beavers. Were they beavers?
Where? Or
In the creek behind us.
Bullfrogs.
You know, not
Beavers?
bullfrogs, the ones that go into the holes under the ground. Not beavers, what were they?
muskrats.
Muskrats. Yes.
Right.
Oh, we had those, a nest of those one.
On Elgin Drive. In the creek behind, in our yard.
Yeah, I remember seeing him swimming.
Not
Yes,
in
muskrats.
muskrats and,
Elgin Drive.
Elgin
creek.
Drive, in the creek behind us. You know
I
where,
wasn't aware we had any muskrats in there. We had bullfrogs.
no, but we
No,
had
muskrats.
muskrats. Remember when you shored that wall of the creek?
Yeah.
That there were muskrats, they would go under the ground and burrow under the ground, and the ground from the yard would go into the creek. they were Albeck's and Herchick's. Everybody, nobody liked them.
The muskrats.
Yes, because they would tunnel under our back lawn. They would tunnel under there.
I wasn't aware, I didn't remember them getting into the tunneling under our backyard
Oh,
on
they did.
Elgin Drive.
Yes,
When we lived on Glenwood Drive. Was it Glenwood?
No, there's
Yes,
no,
Gwen.
no river, no stream.
no, there was water there also, in the a little farther from our yard, there was water there.
Oh, no.
But it was on Elgin Drive, the muskrats. Anyhow, Mrs. Albeck allowed her niece's husband to set traps.
Uh-huh.
And then he went on the golf course where that little lake was and set traps. And I went out and I saw him setting traps on our property, and I went out and I asked him not to set traps on our property.
Oh, no, can you imagine?
You know, I didn't
Yeah.
like that idea. And so he was respectful and he said, okay, that's okay.
Right.
He said, I'm sorry or something like that. And then he went and set them on the golf course. And Thomas and I went out after dark. And we got a big stick. And
You
Thomas,
sprung them?
huh?
You sprung them?
Yes.
What, so the muskrats wouldn't get caught, right?
Yeah. So the muskrats would get.
I don't have any recollection of that. Was I?
You weren't there. Thomas, you were already in Portsmouth. Thomas is.
I was going to say, I don't remember that either.
Yeah. But you know, another funny thing I have to do, I was writing some of this down while you were there, but another thing, Helen and I, do you want to hear this?
Yes, everything you've written
wait just
down.
a minute.
But just keep talking, Mom, I'm going to go use the restroom.
Okay, go ahead, wait just a minute. Excuse me a minute, Catherine.
Okay, that's fine.
Not see. Okay, Dan Creek. Okay. I told you that. Oh, another thing, already, I don't know that you're interested in this. Wait, Dorothy Willicking. It's another thing that happened. Yeah, we had a lot of fun. It was much simpler. We had this friend, Ann Helen and I, Dorothy Thompson, and we went on trick-or-treating also. And I remember we went up this house on 13th Street and they had a big hole, and I don't know whether there were pipes under there that they were digging or what. And she was dressed in a big white sheet. This is Aunt Helen's friend and I. And they didn't have it barricaded, and she couldn't see where she was going in this big deep hole. Fell into it with her sheet. But another thing that was so funny was that, one thing we used to do though is, that was Dorothy Thompson, she fell in there. That was funny, but one thing we used to do at nighttime, this is what I'm saying, just.
Reaching the light on,
Yeah, it might make some sense.
so you can see.
Turn the light on.
Is there, can this be?
Oh, that's what we used to do, that's right. Aunt Helen and I, you know, she always had a few pennies. And we would, life was so much safer then.
Right.
It was safer then. But when we were young, you know, they were all Ukrainians there, you know. And there was a street light, and at nighttime after, you know, supper, we would go under the street light.
Mm-hmm.
And we would play like with chalk and stones, and we would play games while the mothers sat on the steps of the porch and talked. But now Aunt Helen and I used to go dancing. Like I said, they would move every 6 months or 9 months to a new place, you know,
Right.
the whole crowd would shift. And they would go, and for a while we would go out to Claridge. That was near where Aunt Julie lived.
Mhm.
It was the Blue Room, and that's where Aunt Helen met Uncle Roy out
Okay.
there. And Aunt Helen would always have money because she had tips.
Mhm.
And this, when you went out of the Blue Room, and we would probably take a bus out there, and it was like 5 miles from where we live, and Aunt Helen and I would start walking home, like 10 or 11 o'clock. And we always knew someone would come and pick us up.
Right.
And it was okay. And there was this little guy who, you know, he was so short that nobody would give him the time of day. But he had a nice big car. And we'd be walking along the highway, you know, going home. There was almost no traffic. And he would always pull up and take us home.
Mm.
And I think it was just, you know, that little bit of company that he enjoyed.
Right.
And it was safe to go with
Yeah,
him.
yeah.
Any of them who would pick us up, and we would walk. I don't think we ever had to really walk home the
Right.
whole way because somebody, but just on the way out was this little room where you could get a hamburger or something to take home.
Mhm.
And Aunt Helen would never let me know that she had any money. And then finally, when we approached the kitchen, she'd say, "Do you want a cheeseburger?" And I'd say, "Yes." They were the best cheeseburgers to this day that I have. And it was, and I couldn't think of his name tonight. I couldn't think of it. And I knew it was a one-syllable name like Max or Mike or something.
Mhm.
It was Fritz.
Fritz. Oh,
And I
okay.
remembered it. And he made the best cheeseburgers you ever taste. So we would be eating these along the road, walking home, and somebody would come and pick us up like that. But these were, but like I said, and then Aunt Helen, we would go to the movies that have double features.
Mhm.
And we would stay there like all day.
Wow.
You could just stay there,
Yeah,
we would
once-
take food with us to eat, you know, lunch. and
Yeah.
that, And we would watch the movie over and over again. And then there was this kid, you know, there were some sections of town. We were in a poor section, but there were the poor English people. you know.
Right.
And there was this kid, he was kind of a little peculiar or something, and he sat next to me in the movie theater, you know. And then the next thing I knew, he put his hand on my leg. And I told Aunt Helen, and we got up and we left.
What did he put on your leg?
He put his hand on my leg
Oh,
in the movie theater,
oh.
just like on my knee.
Oh boy.
And out of there,
Yeah, I guess so.
we left, but we would stay to see the movie, and we'd stay to see it again, double features, and we would just like, you know, just stay there much of the day. Into the
Wow.
night.
Okay.
So, you know,
Yeah.
these were some of the, you know,
Pastimes, right? What you guys
What?
did in your free time.
yeah, but it was, I mean, like I said, you didn't have to worry. I mean, there were some things, you know, that happened that, you know, that are very sad that happened, you know, that people still have problems
Yeah.
to this day. These things are human things,
Right.
but you didn't have the problems that you do now with, you know, you could get into a car with somebody
Right.
and
it
they
wasn't
would
a
take
big
you
deal.
home if they said they were taking you home.
Right. Yeah.
And then one time, and Helen and we got a hold of some guys who had a car. And we wanted to go to a cemetery at nighttime. We made
That
them
sounds like Helen.
we both did. We made them take us to a cemetery at nighttime. And it was up at Brush Creek Road. You know how we used to go from Penn up to the highway to the turnpike?
Mhm.
We took that road. Along there is a cemetery.
Right.
We went in and we went up to I remember up to the top of the cemetery, and we parked. And then Helen was scared. And And she wanted, and she got them to get us out of there fast. She said she saw something white moving ahead of her. Now, you know, she probably had a terrific imagination.
Yes, yes,
I didn't see anything.
right.
But she saw something and she wanted those guys to get us out of there as fast as we could. But these are some of the things that, you know, that we used to do together. But listen, did you get any